Hello, this is Matthew with Leadership Challenges and Supervision. This is the Lesson 3 video reflection and analysis. So for the first prompt, do you think leadership styles is fixed and unchangeable, or can leaders be flexible and adaptable with respect to style? Why? So I'd say in an environment where things are constantly changing, where there's always new people, always coming in and out of the job, always, processes are always changing. I feel like leaders should be or can be flexible and adaptable, and they should be, because considering how times are now, being against change is very detriment to a company, and being so is just harder for leaders to adapt to different styles of employment. People can bring different things to the table, and sometimes leaders, if they don't adapt to them or they don't change, they can't really shift focus or be able to work well with others. So in order for leaders to be successful in their businesses, they should be able to be flexible and adaptable to different styles, especially with leadership. Because if a leader is not being flexible, they're not going to really be able to do much with that. They're going to just be hard and rigid with their rules. They're going to be probably a lot more defensive against their employees. Maybe they're going to be less open. They're going to be less they're going to just not be very good guides, in a sense, to their employees if they don't if they're very fixed and unchangeable. So they need to be very adaptable and flexible with their sort of leadership style, because again, if people don't really shift or gravitate towards a more adaptable style of leadership, they're going to just sink with the ship and probably cause a department or the whole company itself to essentially go under if they choose to basically not shift towards change. And yeah, it just makes sense. Because back then, it's easier to think, oh well, people, if we don't change, change isn't always a good thing. But especially nowadays, again, at least in America, where there's different people with different mindsets, different cultures, you're always going to need to think on your feet, always be flexible and just adaptive to your situations. You always need to be on top of things as a leader, especially if there's different situations that need your focus, or different deadlines, or different just mindsets, because leaders need to know how to basically not really exploit, but how to use those different mindsets effectively within their groups. So just leaders should always be flexible and adaptable. So that's what I think. So the second prompt: reflect on a leader that you've worked with or observed. How would you describe their leadership style, and how did it impact the group or organization? So my last job was at Publix as a grocery clerk. My manager, Mike, I'll just say that, and he was a very outgoing manager. He was very, he was direct with his his orders. But he was also very open. If you had an issue, you'd go to him and you talk to him about it. If you had problems, you'd go to him, stuff like that. He was a very open manager who was always willing to help you or a customer, no matter what. So he was very flexible with his employees, and especially with time off. He wasn't very rigid about it. He was very understanding about different situations. So he was just a very good manager, But in Publix, you get different managers all the time. But he was the most recent one, and yeah, I'd say he was a very good manager in terms of the kinds of managers I've had before. And yeah, he was just very, a very like down to earth person. He also very much like talked well with us, especially because there was very different like age groups at the Publix. There were some older guys and me. There were some younger guys, so he was able to mix well with each group. So he was a very good leader, I'd say. And how did it impact the group organization? So I'd say it impacted the organization and the people around us very positively, because things were always working out smoothly. People, even if we were shorthanded, a day always didn't really end up being bad. It always ended up being going smoothly. There was no like issues or problems that were hard to deal with. So yeah. And like I said, he was like a very open manager. You could talk to him about basically anything and you wouldn't get in trouble, because you could talk about like stuff we were interested in, because he was a fairly like young boss. I think he was a few years older than me probably, so he was easy to talk with, and it really made it better to come into work and not dread it every day, because I could talk to the manager and be myself. So yeah, it just felt like I could be open, and if I had issues because I was newer, he would help me out with certain things. And he'd also most managers sometimes don't really like work with their employees or get down in the trenches with them. Mike really helped us a lot with like heavy lifting, and customers too. If there were certain customers that were being a little too hard-headed, he'd be pretty natural with dealing with them, and he would be very helpful and giving us like guidance on how to deal with those kinds of customers, and how to deal with different, how to set up different displays and different shortcuts we could take at work. He was a very good manager, I'd say. And then the organization, I don't know how it really affected Publix itself, because like I said, managers do get shifted around a lot. But I'd say it made working there a lot easier. It definitely did, and it made gave me different experiences on how leaders should really be with their employees. You should always be kind of letting them have a space where they can talk and be able to just be themselves, not totally, but be able to express themselves if they have different successes or different issues with how work is going. So yeah, it was a very good experience with Mike. So I'd say he was a very good leader. According to Chapter 3, what are some benefits and drawbacks to task-oriented versus people-oriented leadership styles? So what I saw in the textbook that were some drawbacks to task-oriented and leadership styles were that they have different situations where they work in well with. So like, sometimes task-oriented and or people-oriented leadership styles don't really mesh well with different situations, and sometimes people can't really shift to different leadership styles, so maybe that's a drawback. But some benefits I saw with task-oriented was that people would probably get more deadlines done faster. If the manager is setting clear goals and clear deadlines, people are going to be finishing their work on time, and there isn't that many like delays when it comes to work with task-oriented. But people-oriented, task-oriented seems a lot less people-focused, so maybe it's a lot less having to do with people than work. So maybe some people's emotions or feelings may get left behind, and yeah, so maybe that's some drawbacks to task-oriented too. People-oriented, it's like being open to people's emotions and different relationships. So being just people-oriented. So being able to let people, or just being an open manager and letting them have a space to be themselves. And a drawback that I saw was if it tends to focus on people, it's probably going to be focused less on the task itself. So maybe some things may fall through the cracks, some deadlines may get um, passed by, and people may not notice it, or work may be delayed or late way more than they need to be. So, but yeah, which do you personally lean towards and why? I'd say more people oriented because I want people, as a manager, I'd want people to feel more open in a work environment, more trustworthy in a leader. So I want people to know that they are, you know, able to talk to me about different situations or different successes they have. And I want to be able to reward them or just tell them to do better, stuff like that. So I want them to feel that they have a space with me that they can talk to me about. But I think having both styles is important because obviously in an organization there's going to be deadlines, there's going to be different tasks that need all hands on deck. So I'd say both hand in hand need to be um, put into a leadership style, but I feel like I do lean towards people oriented because I do care about people's different situations and their feelings. Because, you know, sometimes every situation is different and people are always changing. You know, their life isn't always going to stay the same. And yeah, I feel like people should always have a place or a guide within their lives that they are able to count on, especially in work, and someone who can, you know, help them, prop them up, be the foundation of them organization, you know, and just be the rock of the company and be able to hold everyone together. So for the last prompt, how does self-awareness of one's leadership traits like extroversion, can't say the word, conscientious, conscientiousness help improve leadership effectiveness? Share an example from your own experience or observation. So I'd say how does self-awareness of one's leadership traits? So I'd say self-awareness is very much needed when it comes to leadership because you need to be able to check yourself and be able to understand your own emotions, and that would help you understand other people's emotions, and that would really help you become a very effective leader in a sense. If you're able to keep your emotions in check, you're able to understand, you know, different situation or different emotions in situations. It would probably make you more of an effective leader than anything. And an example of your own experience or observation. So I'd say it was recently, there was a group project I had to work with a group of people in statistics, and there was a guy who was, you know, he kind of implemented himself as the leader of the group because he was the one who was speaking up the most, and you know, no one really said no to him being kind of like the director of the group project, but he did definitely like micromanage, and it made stuff harder to like work work with him. But eventually he like saw that being like very micromanagey and very, you know, interfaces with different assignments, he was very like, he told us that he would take a step back and help any way he could, but he'd still, you know, be the one telling us what to do. But yeah, it's just some leaders need to experience that, you know, sometimes their leadership styles aren't always the end all be all or the answer of for every employee. So yeah, I mean, it just takes experience. But yeah, like leaders should always feel like they have their own self-awareness and have that experience, because, you know, not everyone has that kind of self-awareness. Sometimes people are very oblivious to how they act around people, and yeah, they just need to work on themselves and work on their self-awareness each time. Like the guy I was working with in statistics, you know, you always got to be aware of what you're doing, or you better check yourself or wreck yourself in some sense. Because if you're being too harsh with the people around you, you're going to end up failing them and yourself in the long run. Thank you.